Okay, so what we got is we have the scene, and I can just create a particle anywhere in here by just going to the hierarchy, right click, effects, and there's a particle system. Just click on that. And it will automatically create one, and this is the default particle system. So the orange stuff is just showing the kind of like the texture boundaries. If I go to the game, it's actually just that, just the texture inside it. And by default, a default particle uses this material here. Looks like this. If I can find it, where is it? There we go. Looks like that. It's literally just a soft blob particle, and that's the default particle that it uses. We'll change this now later. Cool. So let me zoom into it so we can see what it's doing. So at the Mo, if I scroll all the way down, it's got a bunch of stuff here. I'm going to ignore this and just scroll all the way down. There is this thing called a renderer, and the renderer is what the particle is showing. At the moment, it's a billboard. There's a bunch of different options. You can do a stretch billboard, so you see the way it's stretched them out a little bit, and the amount that it stretches is controlled here. You can just, like any of these numbers, you can either type into them, or you can hover to the left of them and just drag your mouse, like hover and drag to change. You see now I have this kind of aurora borealis type of stretch looking thing, because it's just stretched the billboard. I have a horizontal, and if I look at it from the side, it's invisible. I won't be able to see it in the game, because I can barely see it there, because it's horizontal to the camera. I can see it from the top though. Cool. And I have a vertical billboard. It's going to be the same as a normal billboard. And I can also do a mesh. So for example, in the mesh, if its default is a cube, it doesn't look like anything here, but if I rotate, well, why is it a cube? Render mesh, use a sphere. There we go. So you see little spheres showing up, and they're all little meshes of spheres, or little capsules, or little. The cubes are all facing the camera, which is annoying. Can't really see them. Okay, but for now we're doing a billboard, and what a billboard does, it's like a sprite. It's like a 2D sprite, but the billboard is always facing the camera. Okay, so say you're my camera. If the sprite is moved, it always faces the camera. So to the camera, it looks like the texture is always looking at it. All right, and that's useful for. I asked if everyone was here.
I wasn't listening.
So what it'll do is it'll always rotate to face the camera. So you don't need to worry about like if the player walks around the particle, for example, so because it's always turning the face. The only thing you need to worry about later on, maybe if you guys do VR, in virtual reality, some 2D particles don't look well because you can see that they're 2D, depending on the angle. Especially if they're horizontal or something, it looks really obvious that they are 2D particles. But for now, this works fine, and it's there. So, what can we do to a particle? So this is the default. It starts off, they're all shooting up in this direction. They're all dying over here. You can see them dying all in the same kind of area, and they have this randomized angle they're firing out of. So let's go through them one by one. So first of all is the duration. Duration is how long the particle lasts. Right now it's 5. If I put this to 1 second and I turn off looping, that means it'll play for 1 second and stop immediately. I can restart that. Plays for 1 second, stops. That's what duration is. I make that 3. It'll play for 3 seconds and then stop. If I hit looping, it just keeps running over and over and over. So duration doesn't really matter. It does for a few other things, but it doesn't really matter that much because it's basically just keeping going. Every time it stops, it starts again. This pre-warm thing, let me see if I can see it in the game. Yes, I can. This pre-warm thing is important. So if I have it off right now, if I press play, you'll see what happens. The particle starts emitting when the game starts. It just starts when the game starts. You can also delay that. So there's a start delay. So I can do like a wait 2 seconds And when we look at it, there's a 2-second delay, and then it starts. Cool. Now, what happens if I want it to start immediately? For example, if I load the player into a cave scene and there's a torch on the wall, I don't want it to be like they enter the cave scene and then all the torches slowly start having fire. It looks weird. I want it to look like the torches were already lit when I came in. So I'll just turn on pre-warm. And pre-warm basically pre-calculates it. So when I press play, it looks like it's been going the whole time. Like it doesn't slowly start, it just keeps running straight away. Cool? Now, where's my particle system? Play. If it stops playing, you can just pause, play, and restart here. Alright, so those are the pre-warm settings. There is also start lifetime. Start lifetime is how long the particles can live before they die. So if I drop that down, remember you can just hover over here where you see the 2 little drags. And now the lifetime is 0.4. They're all dying after 0.4 seconds. If I make it longer, they live for ages. And they last for ages. They keep going. What I can also do, say 0.4, I can do a randomization. So there's a few different types of randomization. If I click on this drop down arrow here, there is a constant, which is right now 0.4. So all of them are constant. There is a curve, and you can select from a few different curves here. So it'll start off that they start off dying at 0, and they slowly start living longer and longer and longer and longer. And you can double click on the curve and do things like this. So the particles, like there'll be a lot of particles that live longer, then there'll be a lot of particles that don't live very long, then a lot of particles that live longer over the duration of the particle. So over the duration here, 3 seconds. So here, when it starts, it'll emit a lot of particles that die really quickly. It'll emit a lot of particles that live for ages and then die really quickly, then live for ages. So kind of a curve, okay? But the easiest one to use is probably random between 2 constants. So I can say, randomly make the start lifetime between 0.4 to 3. And you can see that happening. Some of the particles are lasting for ages, and they live for ages. Some of the particles die real fast. It randomly chooses between them. You make up 5. Cool. So some of them last for ages, some of them die real quick. Same thing with the start speed. Right now they're all 5. You see they're all shooting at exactly the same speed. Make it faster, to fire faster. Make it slower, to fire slower. But I can make it between 2 constants again. So let's make it like 0.1, 0.21, 2.1. Cool. So they're randomly, some of them stay down here, some of them are firing. The start size, again, how big all of them are. I can make them huge, they're all gigantic. And same, can randomize. So I can randomize, so some of them are real big, some of them are real small. So right now I have a really crappy default particle, the really soft, just circle thing, and already it sort of looks like pretty okay smoke. It's pretty terrible, but it's not bad for just like 2 seconds of work or whatever. So I can just create this a bit bigger, and this will be how it starts. There is also start rotation. So as I rotate that, you see the way they start at different rotations. You can even randomize it. So they'll randomly go between rotations. Random between 2 constants. So they're randomized. Now the only thing is they don't look any different. Why? Because it's a texture of a circle. So if you rotate a texture of a circle, it looks like a texture of a circle. So, but this is going to be useful for us later when we start adding in loads of different types of textures. All right. Let me just increase the speed there. Gravity modifier, this will make gravity show up. Let me just make them a bit smaller so you can see what they're doing. And I'll make the speed a bit. Make the speed a bit higher. So they all fire up and then they kind of fall down. Yeah, you totally can. This is basically how you would do that. So I can make it a really high gravity modifier, so they're all firing up and then they all drop down. And if I look at it from the side especially, it looks very much like a little fountain being shot up and down. The game looks a bit clearer. So it looks like a spring kind of thing. So they're useful for that. And then we go to, we'll leave simulation space for now. And simulation speed is how fast it plays. And whether it plays in awake. So if I click this off and I press play, it will not play at all. It just stays there. Now why you would want that is if you want it to be activated only by, let's say I step on a trap and it activates the particle or something, you would do that. So you turn off the play that'll play on awake, and then in code you kind of access it and you go particle system.play or something, and it'll play that particle system. Okay, so that's useful for that. The maximum particles is the maximum amount of particles this system will allow on screen at one time, or in the game at one time. So if I make my maximum particles like 1, it will only ever allow one particle to exist at a time. So until that particle dies, no new particle can show up. Okay? So you can leave that at 1000. Cool. And then this auto random seed is basically, if you take that on, it's completely randomized. If you take that off, it should loop. So it should look the same. Now I haven't got it to loop properly. Every time I've seen it, it doesn't really loop properly. But it should. That's what it should do. And we go to emission now. Emission, there's a rate over time. Right now it's on 10. I can go like 500. And now I have shit tons of particles all over the place. So that's 500. I probably don't want that. It's going to kill my computer. 10. Cool. Or I can also do this real cool thing. So if I make the rate of time 3, I can do a burst. So every so often it can fire a burst. I have 3 seconds of the particle living, right? The duration is 3. So if I add a burst at time 0, it fires off 30 particles. See that? So it starts off. So every 3 seconds essentially fires 30. You can do like 50. No, do like a 200. So it's more obvious. So loads of particles show up at time 0. Every time it goes 0 to 3, starts back at 0, fires off a burst. Okay, and you can add more. You can add press plus, and at time 1, I'll do kind of 30. So you see a big burst and then a small burst, a big burst and then a tiny burst. So you can do like fountains spurting water and shit like that. Like there's loads of little effects you can do with that. And if you don't like that, just minus, and you go back to the normal. Oh god, too many. Cool, 10. So here's where we get to the emission shape. So remember I was talking about the sphere and stuff? Right now it's a cone, which means they're all firing in the direction of that cone. You can change the angle just by like doing that. If I do that, it's basically a cylinder. They all fire straight up. Or if I do that, it's really wired. They all fire like almost like a circle in all directions. The radius is controlled there, so I can have it over a huge area. Like it's firing all over that huge wide area. Or I can have it over a teeny tiny area, so they all appear exactly from a point. So if I do that, they all fire directly in a line, essentially. Straight up, straight down. But I can also change it to like sphere, and a sphere radius is here. Or is my radius not showing up? There we go. There's my radius, so it's appearing randomly anywhere inside that sphere. And then there's like donuts and loads of other weird meshes and stuff. You can even add your own meshes in there as long as you have a mesh. You can find your own 3D model and add it in. Circles. And you can even do like an edge if you're doing a 2D game. It only appears only from that edge. Okay? Let me just save this scene. There's one thing I needed to show you in the 2D scene. So here's a 2D scene we were working on before. If I create a particle system, you see the way it's hidden behind? This is fine in 3D. In 3D you don't have this problem. You just put it where you want it to be. But in 2D you do have this problem where of the sorting layers. And on the particle system, you need to change it. In the render, sorting layers are where are they? Am I missing it?
Order layer, third bottom.
Oh, nice. There we go. Sorting layer is here, so I can put it to the foreground sorting layer, and the order layer I can change it, let's say, to like 1000. It'll always be in front then. Or I can change it so it's in the background layer. So you see the way it's behind the walls. Sorry, behind the background, but it also behind the walls. Do you have that? Oh, you're just there. So you can basically change the sorting layer. So there you go. It's in front of the background, but behind the walls. You can change it on the sorting layer. Let's go back to the cool scene. Don't save. So back to the cool particle system. There we go. What was I doing? I was changing the emission shape. So I'll go back to the cone, and they're all firing upwards like that. Cool. Alright, so there's a bunch of other stuff. I'm just going to make this speed a bit faster as well, and the gravity a bit higher. Cool. Alright, so here we go. We are now getting into the things that do stuff over a lifetime. So you can also increase each particle's velocity over a lifetime by adding these kind of modifiers. And this is useful for kind of creating wave shapes and stuff like that. So if I turn off the gravity, so they're all going to fire up. Cool, between there. So they're all shooting up, and they're all like firing up like that, which is fine. I can do velocity over lifetime. So for example, now they're all blowing that way over their lifetime because they are going the X direction. I can just drag that here and there, so they do X direction, and then I can do Y as well. Y, click and drag. There's the Y, and then the Z axis as well. So it controls that. So it kind of randomizes that. I can also do random between two constants. So they can randomly kind of move around on time. So you see they're kind of changing velocity over time. I can do a curve. So let's say in the X, I can start here. If you double click on a curve, you add a point. So I can make them go right, then go left, then go right. I don't know if you can see that. They're kind of waving now. Let me make them last a bit longer. I'll make these constant. I'll make all of these constant so you can see what they do. Constant. We'll take a break in a second as well. So you can kind of see them doing that now. They're going right, then you go left, then you go right, then you go left. Right, and that's controlled because I'm doing this curve. Right, left, right, left. It's positive X, negative X, positive X, negative X. And you can do that for all the axes. And that's how you would kind of make random particles being puffed with smoke. You can do it between two constants, between two curves as well. So I have two X curves here. If I click on this, the second X curve is here. So like they kind of randomize between there, and you should see them being a lot more messy. They're kind of going all over the place now because I'm randomizing between these constants. Cool. So if I turn it off or turn it on. Then I'm going to skip all of these. There's a color of a lifetime, and this one is a cool one. So if I click on this white bar, it's a random gradient. If I click on the bar, the bottom is color and the top is alpha. So the bottom, let's say I can start, this is over the lifetime. If I start at red, and I can click on the last one and end at like blue. So red to blue. I can also add one in the middle by clicking here, and let's make it go to green. So you can see them all going red to green to blue. You can also add opacity at the top, that's the alpha. So if I click on this, I drop the alpha to 0, and then they go up to maximum, They go from maximum and they go back to 0. So now you should see just there, just before they die, they fade away. So they don't just blink out of existence anymore, they kind of fade out. And if I play, you can see that a lot clearer. So they're not blinking into existence. If I turn this off, they all appear, they just kind of pop in and they pop out. But if I turn on the color over lifetime, they're fading in and they're fading out. So it looks a lot more soft, like smoke fading away or something. You can also randomize between gradients, which is pretty cool. So they randomly go between one color or other colors. So let's do that to yellow or something. So now they're kind of randomly choosing between those two gradients, swapping between them. Cool. Am I going too fast? You okay?
Would you use emissions to sort of do, like, say, like a burst with a couple of seconds delay or something, and then burst again?
It would be an emission on the burst, yeah. Yeah. You would make the duration to like at least 3 seconds, and you would do it every 2 seconds or something like that. Let's skip all these. You also have size over lifetime. So if I click on this, by default it gives me this graph. Now this size over lifetime overrides my start size. So if I turn it off, they all are exactly the same start size because I set them at the same start size, 0.77. If I turn on size over lifetime, this graph overrides it. And what I can do with this is I can, by default, it's like, you see the way they start small and over lifetime they get big? I make the start size 4. So they start at 0 and they grow to 4 because it's a direct linear line. But I can also double click and I can make them go big, then go small, then go big, go small. And you see them doing that? So they go bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. They change over lifetime. They go smaller and bigger and smaller. And you can also randomize this. So that you can see how we're starting to get closer to smoke and to fire and stuff. You would randomize them so the particles do different things. And then we also have rotation over lifetime. And this is a lot easier. We can just do angular velocity random between two constants, minus 45 to 45, or whatever number. And you see them all rotating randomly over their lifetime. Again, it's only a circle texture that I have, so it looks like a circle rotating. I can't tell. But we'll put on a different texture now. We should be able to see what happens. So this is where we go to adding textures. By default, it uses the default particle that I showed you before. It's just this kind of particle. I have created in Photoshop this shape. It was only these ones first. Pixels with 256. Okay, and then I'm going to save that as a PNG because I need the alpha transparency. And the reason why I made it white is because it needs to be able to tint. And if it's white or gray or something that's not pure black, Unity can tint that color. So I've saved that already before as a PNG called particle. So I can just import it. Import new asset. There's particle, import. There it is here. And I need to make something called a material. So by default, the particle system doesn't use a sprite, it uses a material. So we'll go over materials next week and stuff, but for now I'm just going to right click in the project, create material, I'll call it particle, and on the albedo I'll drag in that particle. Now it doesn't do anything because it's still on a standard shader. I need to change the shader to particles, and I'll do this alpha blended pre-multiply. That particle should, or alpha blended even. Particles, alpha blended. Cool. And you can see that particle is now that shape that I put on. If I go back to the particle system and drag that material in, boop, they're all now that shape. And now you can see the rotation. It's a lot clearer. Or a lot clearer because like it has a shape that's rotating. Cool. Alright, so let's see, go over the rest. Rotation by speed, triggers, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So try that for a second. Mess around with those, especially getting the particle material on, and then we'll move on to the next parts, which are a bit more advanced particles as well. It's the same system, there's just a few more things that we can do that are pretty cool.
Did they know your coach?
You can. The only issue with darting particles off the acid store is they may not be using the normal particle system, so you may not be able to interact with them the usual way. You can. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Once you're there, make your own. Like you can. It is a quick way of doing stuff. Just they usually do some weird stuff usually, especially if you download the acid store because they're easy to make. So if they're on the acid store, they're usually complicated weird ones that do, you know, strange things. Not always.
What is everyone's sleeping?
You've tried to find the system. I'll literally go to the process. Pink is usually just way of telling you this rotation. Anytime you see black pink, unless you say this rotation. That's what I was going to do.
Either that or your game is absolutely
5 minutes. If you want to be like meta, you could do it then. Everyone who does usually will do it just but you could do it as a kind of like commentary.
What?
Oh, you would just use a white one like that and then color. Use a default system. Are we all good? Does anyone have any issues? That's it? Alright, so if people are good, I'm going to move on. Is that okay? Or do you want to hang on? It's fine if we do. Alright, the next thing I want to add, now we're getting into the kind of cool stuff. Next thing I want to add is this thing called trails. Let me just make it a bit faster so it fires off a bit quicker. Alright, so it's firing off, it's going bigger and smaller and stuff. And I can add this thing called trails. If I turn them on, you see the way that they're kind of like trailing off into the distance and they have these pink things behind them. So as I was saying to a few people over there, these pink things are Unity saying, hey, you don't have any texture, so I don't know what to do. I'm going to give you this pink thing instead. And that's because down in the renderer, where it says trail material, I have none here. So if I just go and find, I can put whatever material I want, but I'll just use the default material. Come on, buddy. Particle. There we go. I'm using the default particle. You see the way it's like trailing behind. And let me make the gravity come back. Let me just give it more speed and some gravity. And more gravity. Where's gravity? Come on. There we go. Cool. So I've got like a little fountain type thing. So this trail system here, where we go, trails. These trails, first of all, it's a ratio. So the ratio is, you all know ratios, right? 1 to 1 means like everything. So ratio 1 means everything has a trail. All of the parts have a trail. If I want half of them to have a trail, 0.5. So half of them have trails, half of them don't. 10%, I'd be 0.1, for example. So some of them do, some of them don't. But for now, let me just do 1. Lifetime is if you hover over them, actually, it tells you. Lifetime is the lifetime relative to the particle. So if I want the trails to die off before the particles die off, I can do it like 0.5. So the trails only last halfway, see that? And they kind of die before the particles die. Or I can leave it as full. I'll leave it like this. It's kind of nice. And the minimum vertex distance, oh, that higher. You see the way now they're quite jaggedy? I make that last longer, and I make them live longer. So I get this quite weird, cool thing. And basically, this minimum vertex distance is, a vertex is a point. So it's saying like, oh, if I start the trail here, what's the minimum distance I have to go before I start making another point to follow? So if my particle moves like this is the direction of my particle. And I say the vertices are like, let's say this distance is 0.1 or something. So it goes here, it creates a point, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, and then it draws those trails along those vertices. The problem is if I say no, you have to travel a distance of like 30 up to here before you're allowed to draw a line. So it'll draw a line directly, which is what's happening. I've told it you need to travel ages before I allow you to bend. So they're all just doing that. They're all just like locked in particle. Or you can make it more accurate by making this minimum vertex distance smaller. And so now they're super accurate. They follow exactly where the particles go. Okay? So the smaller it is, basically, the more accurate it is. The bigger it is, the more it kind of does that. Or you can do weird stuff like this, where it does it every so often. It's kind of weird shapes. But this is kind of funny as well. It looks like a, I don't know what it looks like. It's weird. So you see the way they have to travel a distance of 30 before they're allowed to bend over here. Okay. This die with particles thing as well is whether they die with the particles. So when the particle disappears, do they die? If I turn that off, they still stay and fade away slowly before they die. The texture mode at the moment is stretch. I can also do a thing called tile. So right now they're stretching. It's that one circle fuzz that I have stretch along the whole trail. So if it's bending, it's like stretching it all the way up and down. So I can also do a tile. Boop. And it kind of does that. It just repeats them over and over. It's also kind of fun, depending on what you want. The size of the particle affects the width of the trail. So I can turn it off, and they're all exactly the same width as well. You can also do that. And then if I turn off inherent particle color, I can change them all to, for example, all of them are red. So they all follow the same thing. Or I can leave it inheriting the particle color. Come on, go white. Go white. And inherit particle color. Cool. Alright, so they're all working there. That's pretty cool. So that is trails. Grand. Now we got some other cool stuff here. For example, we have a collision. And if I click on collision, nothing will happen. It doesn't collide with anything. So there's two modes of collision. One is the planes mode, and this is the old method. It's not old, it's still used a lot, it's more efficient. And what a planes method is, if I create a plane in here, so a 3D object, plane, make it bigger, bigger, and just make sure that some of the particles are hitting it, great, here. And I can turn off the renderer if I want, I can just have that collider there. That particle system can interact with that plane if I tell it to. So if I just drag in that plane here, you should see they're all bouncing off that plane kind of thing, which is fine. That's completely fine if I only needed to bounce off one area and I don't need it to be accurate. So it is cheaper to do it this way. Now, if I want to be fancy and bounce off everything, let me move the particle system over here. So let's say I wanted to bounce off this and then bounce off this. I could put one plane here and one plane here, or I could just be lazy, and it's a lot more expensive to calculate, but I can be lazy and go planes, world. So now this should bounce off this, and let me make them last a bit longer as well. Start lifetime, a bit longer. And I'm going to drop the emission because they're getting a bit quicker. So you see they kind of bounce off that, and they bounce off this, and they bounce off that as well. So in the game mode, they're all bouncing all over each other. You can also change the collision quality. Right now it's high, but if you drop it down to low, it doesn't affect. It sometimes still kind of does. It shouldn't. It says here static colliders. That means it won't affect unless a collider is static. And to set a collider to static, go to cube or the collider and you turn it on static. This is a very useful thing. I don't know if you've seen the static thing before. Why doesn't it turn on? Here we go. What static does is it tells Unity this object will never move. When I play the game, you can move it in game view obviously, but when I play the game, that object will stick there and never move. And it's very useful for a lot of things. It's useful for calculating lighting. It's useful for calculating physics. So Unity doesn't need to watch that object and go, oh, are you moving, are you moving, are you moving? If it's set as static, Unity goes, okay, it's there. It's not going to move. So it's fine. So it's good for things like that. So it's a bit cheaper. And it still works just the same. Like, it is good practice. If something's not moving, set it to static. Alright, so that's cool. Just don't be weirded out if I go and, like, if I take this cube and it's static and I put a rigid body, it's not going to do anything. So I'll press play, or it shouldn't do anything. Oh, no, it does. Okay, I lied. Wait, isn't it static? It is static. Should be. Well, I guess you still can. Static seems weird nowadays. So I lied. So particle system and collide quality with high, and you can change what it collides with as well. You have physics layers. You guys have seen physics layers? Yeah? Okay. So that's basically how you do. So you can get the particles to ignore certain things. For example, you can ignore the player, so you can walk through it, but then it doesn't ignore everything else. So that's collision. Now also, what I can also do with collision is right now they're just bouncing off immediately, but I can also dampen the bounce. So every time they bounce, they kind of lose a bit of speed. So I can do like 0.3, for example. And you see the way they kind of get slower every time. I make that smaller even, 0.2. Come on. Yeah, there you go. So they just kind of slow down quite a bit when they get. Come on. There we go. So the more you add onto it, the slower they get dampened. So right now dampen is 0.5, so they should slow down about half of their bounce. And you see that there. So they bounce and then they kind of slow down and they're a bit slower. They bounce a little smaller each time. They don't bounce exactly. Okay. And then the amount they bounce is here as well. So that kind of works with that. Right now it's on 1, and you can change that random as well. So I might want them to bounce randomly. So I can randomly do constants. 0.5. and you can hear my computer kind of getting a bit. So they're all randomly bouncing now. They're not all exactly the same. Some of them are bouncing a bit more, some of them are bouncing a bit less. So it's changing. You see these ones are like kind of stop moving over there. So it's pretty cool. You can do all those things. Okay. So now I'll do a thing. I'm going to turn off the lights. I just need to rotate my directional light and they all turn off. So particle system still working, still moving around, that's fine. What I can do is I can turn on this thing called lights on the particle system. Lights, 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 lights. Here, lights. Cool. Those lights don't do anything at the moment because it needs a light reference. So it needs to know what kind of light I want. So I right click here, I'll just create a light. I can right click anywhere, I can create it anywhere. Light, point light, for example. I can create a point light, and in the lights on the particle system, I'll tell it to use that light as a reference. Where did my lights go? Lights. Just drag that in. That should work. Cool. It's still not working, and why? It's because my ratio is at 0. So none of my particles are going to be having any light on them. If I set that to 1, all of the particles are going to have lights, and my computer will probably die. Can you see them doing it? Like when they bounce, when they hit? Yeah. I can also. It's just that their range is not very long. Let's go back to the scene. You can see it a bit better. Their range is not very far, so I can increase the range here, the range multiplier. So I can make it like 5. Don't die. Don't die. Come on, computer. You can do it. And the intensity to 3. So now they should look pretty intense. There we go. And they're all changing color. Why is it always blue and green? Oh, because it's being told to be only blue and green. Let's move these colors. There we go. So it takes the color of the particle at that time and uses that particle's color. Don't die. Don't die, computer. Cool. Uses that particle color to control what color the light itself is, and that's pretty cool. Like I probably will drop the ratio though because I think I'm dying, so I'll make it like only 30% of the particles will have it. I'm going to do 0.3. Cool. There we go. And you can do stuff like here where it says use particle color, yes or no. Whether the size affects the range. The bigger the particle is, the longer the range will be. And the intensity as well. Size alpha affects intensity. So if the particle fades away, does the intensity of the light fade away as well? So you can make it for, like, say, a flare gun, where it fires off and it slowly fades away. You can use that, for example. And it's really, really nice. Very pretty. I'm going to drop the maximum lights as well to, like, 5, just so it doesn't kill me. And I'm also going to pause because it's doing lighting. Why is it doing lighting? I don't want you to do lighting. You okay? Do you guys want a break? A little break? Or are you okay? Alright, let's pause. Let's take a little break there. Let's take a 5-10 minute break. Yes.
Are you able to do things where the smoke or even the way that is there that doesn't destroy itself on impact with the player? So say you affect the player. So let's say you like
The half weight on the player?
Okay. No, or say like it was rain, for example. I say it was like acid rain, but it's still down to the player.
Oh.
So they're able to do that and then still get it to go through. So they were like use it after.
There's a thing called a trigger on the particles. Now I have to say it doesn't work very great. But you can set it so like when it enters a trigger, what will the particle say to the trigger? So you can do stuff like if the particle enters a trigger, it tells the trigger in code like you check out it, for example. Now to be honest, in reality, I probably wouldn't use that because particles are a bit like particles in physics in general are a bit dodgy. So sometimes it may not register or registers too many times or something like that. So I'd probably do like the particles just for the visual, and then just like the trigger area that if you're on trigger state, slowly take damage. Because then you can calculate exactly how much damage you need to get in short time. I'd probably do that way. So again, same thing as we said, just like separate the visuals from the functionality. Usually. Depends though, maybe sometimes. But you can do it. There's a triggers function of the particle. Here. Should say. Say again, sorry?
Would you say other engines do slightly better community does at the moment?
Yes and no. If someone was tasked to make sure they work correctly, yes. Well, Unity will work great as well if you get someone to make sure it works. It's just a lot of work for
something so small.
Something that may not be that useful. But there is a triggers thing here. If I click on it, and it says like which colliders do I want to interact with, and then what do I do when I interact with those colliders. Okay. You can kill them. So like for example, I can make is it this cube? I can try to make it kill all of them when they hit that cube. So triggers, go to this cube. Cool. And let's say you see the way they're dying straight away as soon as they touch that cube. So I can do stuff like that. So they kind of die when they touch the cube as well.
Yeah, how they're dying on the fact they're generally doing so that trail still sort of follows through. So you see how like the trail and each dies.
Oh yeah, that is where the trails are. If I turn off die with particles, that should work. Does that work? Oh no. No, they're still dying. They are still dying. Ignore. Yeah, they shouldn't. I don't know what's in that, but they shouldn't. Ignore, it's just ignore. Not sure why they are not staying alive. I know, yeah. No, not doing anything. Yeah, they shouldn't die with, I don't know. It's because it's rendering light with something and I can't stop it. It doesn't want to stop. Let's turn off the trigger anyway. There's only a couple more things we need to do for today to show you. So it's fine, we're almost there. Yo. Say what, sorry? Yeah, just give the particles no alpha. Just make the color of the line. Yeah. I have not played it for a while back now. Yeah, because the trails are using right after this last step. I hope they're start.
You know someone worked on it?
Yeah. So your minimum vertex distance make it smaller, and it also follows the path of your particles. So your particles
Basically, it looks like an HC remake of Operation Genesis.
I know, but it's going to be on the next
yeah, well, you just want the speed. So have no speed, but have gravity.
And then again, the practice edition.
These are so good without them. Have you seen some of the games and you know one of the exclusive suits, one of the Iron Spider
How much do you say they'll be charging for the DLC?
I was thinking for Carnival and season for $20 or something. But think about a steelboard case kind of so kind of like a statue. Statue you're looking at it pretty much right? Yeah. Steelboard case with art. You'd be surprised they charge money for it. So that's
bit of both, I think.
That's 125.
When we were into we turned around and went one of the
which seems about right. 40 quid seems to be a bit the season pass.
I was trying to figure out like how much the season pass would be to see if it was worth the collector's edition.
Oh, it works out better. I know it doesn't work out the same.
Look at the quality of mine.
Yeah,
And it was still having
yeah.
But it's still
oh, everything is already on the low.
that's still so 3 days after the
It's still on GameStop's website at the moment, so it's half the day.
What kind of
Did you order already? The GameStop?
See this, I think it's a game you go for fiber down, then say like you get stuff that's time and then they just have a spark collector.
So you only have to put a fiber down, did you?
I was like, can I bring it to the table? Like,
Yeah. Can you take it off in like bits and pieces?
Can you buy it all straight from the mill?
I might do that system a little bit every week. Like, oh, I don't feel like I'm spending €160.
And then you pay.
see what's gonna happen with these. I'm gonna get this game. I'm gonna do somewhere and he's gonna go in on speed before that.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be like, yeah, you're not really put that down.
especially with the trail doesn't scratch.
Could have got like jobs.
Sure, that was his prayer. I just always hate that. I always find out website it's too late. I always find out like clear after they're sold out or months after game.
Yeah, I like to try. I always try to get the big boy edition for Billboard. Oh, that was solid, so good.
Yeah.
I may end up getting it on now on the small store server.
You got the Billboard edition of Fallout actually last year?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
It is completely a waste of money.
Yeah.
It really is.
I remember when
And
I
you
was
saw it, you're like, oh my god, I didn't have
I
this.
spent 10 minutes going, oh, so cool. I bought a phone to go inside on eBay, like a shitty cheap phone to in there. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna wear it around. It's gonna be my desk. It's gonna be my time. It's just plastic things. Don't buy it.
How much?
Not anymore.
the plastic just looked like semi-opaque as well. That's all
I've
I
seen
found.
ones where people painted it and it looks amazing.
Yeah.
But then again,
Yeah, some people here have like done it up and it's
Oh, it
like
looks
for color and stuff.
But the whole idea is spending so much money on this that you don't have to like do it yourself.
Yeah, have you seen some like a cosplay of the radar from like the original Alien? And like what happens is actually people there again.
Oh really?
Like actually like the dot move off like it's the coolest thing.
Oh, it doesn't move. Oh, that'd be cool if there was like
Yeah, that's a lot of like
no, that's your second year project. App on the phone and like the text.
yeah, you just completely go on. You gotta make it load of cosplay. All the coolest things from cosplay just do it.
That should be legit. Alright, we start back. So it's only like a couple other things left to do. So, first one is, right now, it is only doing that pentagon that I had. It's just straight up that pentagon the whole time. I can also animate this. Down here where it says texture sheet animation, I can animate it. So, what I did before, and this is the same as the sprite sheets that you guys have done before already. It's just it starts here, and then it goes to here, and then it goes to here. So frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. So I've saved that, and I just need to import it to Unity, import new asset, and I'll import particle 2. And let me just replace the particle material that I have with this. Now it's going to have a problem. If I look at it, you'll see they all just become that 3 texture. It's just all 3 of them squash into one. So it's not exactly what I want. It's not like correct. I wanted to go first one, then the other, then the next one. So this is not working for me because I haven't. Let me just make them bigger as well. They're so tiny. Oh, computer, please no. Okay, cool. Alright, so I don't want them to just be that 3 things flying around. So if I go back down to the texture sheet animation, I'll turn that on. And I need to tell the texture sheet what textures, sorry, how many textures I have. So the tiles are X and Y1. My texture is like this. Sprite sheet 1, sprite sheet 2, sprite sheet 3. This is the X direction, this is the Y direction. You all know that stuff by now. X is there, Y is there. So how many do I have in X? 3. How many do I have in Y? 1. Right? So I just need to put that in. So X has 3 and Y has 1. Let's try that. Come on, don't die. Give me. Particle. Woo! And you see them. So they start off as they all start off as a pentagon. They all move into the triangle, and then just before they die here, they all turn into like the knockoff Harry Potter. Okay, so that works pretty well. You can animate over the whole. Oh, sorry. You can animate over the whole sheet. The way it animates is weird. I don't know why they do it, but they do a frame over time. So it's like frame 0, and then frame 1, and then frame 2 over here. So it's 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. It just animates between them over time. Okay. If I wanted to change so it stays at frame 0 for ages, for example, let me double click this. I'll drop that down. Come on, come on, come on. Computer says no. Come on. It's very dated, isn't it? What happened to them?
I don't know.
We've been through this before, but this is what's it, a Xennial?
Exennial. Get it right. Why doesn't it move? No, you're not. When were you ever? This is being weird. This is. Alright, cool. So you see the way now they're all kind of like staying at 0 frame for a lot longer. So they're staying at that one for a lot longer, and then just before they die, they change into the triangle, and well, they kind of die too small. You can see them. Some of them just turning into the little thingy, the knockoff Harry Potter, just before they die. So that's how you would change the texture sheets. And you can see that my computer, which is pretty much a beast, is already getting a bit hurt by particles. So it can get really expensive. Okay? If I build it, it'll be a bit better. It'll be a bit better, but probably not much better. Now the last thing I wanted to show you, I'm going to turn off all of this stuff. I'm going to turn off collision, so I don't care about collision. No, I want to leave collision on. I'm going to turn off gravity though. Come on, buddy. I'm going to turn off speed and gravity. So start speed, make it like 0.1. Their lifetime, I'm going to make them last a lot shorter. Apologies for this slowness. It probably would, but sure, it's fine now. So they're all dying real quick. And I will turn, let's see, lifetime is there, gravity, turn it off. I'll let them live a little bit, like maybe 2 or 3. And a little bit of speed. Okay, cool. So they're kind of moving around like this. Cool. So if I create, if that sphere that I had just there, empty, and I'm going to child this particle system to that sphere. 0, 0, 0. And you see the particle system kind of flying all over the place. Shapes cone. Let's do no angle. I will pause. Angle 1. It's still slow. Okay, cool. Play. Cool. They're all firing out like that. Now we'll see what happens when I play it. So they should move with the sphere. Let's play. And it's this weird thing. And you see the way they're kind of moving with the sphere? So it's very strange. They're like linked. They don't trail behind the sphere. It doesn't look like a trail. Now, if I want to make a weird thing like that, fine. That's what I'm doing. But if I wanted to trail behind the sphere, like where the sphere moves, it leaves a little trail. I instead of having that, which is super weird, I instead need to change the particle system to, instead of the simulation space local, I'll change it to simulation space world. Now if I press play, it should leave a trail behind the sphere. So let's see that. And you see the way it's leaving a trail, like a little sparkly trail behind it? Alright? So now it's simulating the world physics as well. Now the reason why it starts off at local is because if I have a particle that's just sitting there, that's a campfire, and it's just sitting there, I never move it. I don't need to calculate, I don't need to check its world position every time. The only time I need to check its world position is if I have it on a moving object, like a torch that I'm carrying, or a ball that's leaving a trail, or whatever it is. Okay, and that's the reason why you have that. So hopefully that makes sense. So I can turn. I actually kind of like the local because it looks funny. The last thing I wanted to show as well that I forgot about when we were doing the trails. Let me just give it a faster speed. Okay, when we're doing the trails, there was the trails. There we go. There was the trails mode as particles, which means they kind of follow behind the particles, or you can do a ribbon, which is a weird thing, and they all kind of connect to each other. So the particles, the trails connect between each other. It's kind of weird. So that's just if you want to do like electricity effect or something. So you have loads of like jaggedy edges. You could do like a ribbon particle, so you have this weird thing. Cool? Alright. And that, in a nutshell, is particles. If there are, let me just check, I haven't missed anything. We've got triggers, we've got external forces, we've got noise. There's a noise thing, which is a bit like a way of randomizing the particle. It's a bit complicated, so if you want to try that, you can. But yeah, we've covered pretty much everything. So